Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to a time when your biggest daily concern wasn't your Wi-Fi signal, but whether you'd have enough calories to see the sunset. We're diving deep into the life of a medieval peasant specifically. What's on your plate? Or rather, what's not on your plate? Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't last a week on this diet, and your foodie Instagram would be depressingly bleak. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see where our little history-loving community is scattered across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel isn't the rough texture of the straw-stuffed sack beneath you, nor is it the damp chill that seems to seep from the very earth of the floor. It's a familiar, hollow ache deep in your stomach. It's not a shark, desperate hunger, not yet. It's a dull, grinding emptiness that serves as your body's truest cock. Long before the first sliver of grey light filters through the wattle and daub walls of your hut, this feeling is what pulls you from a shallow, restless sleep. You lie still for a moment listening. You can hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of your family, all huddled together on the single, large sleeping platform for shared warmth. A few feet away, separated by a low, wobbly partition, you hear a soft snuffle and the rustle of straw. That's Daisy, your cow. In the depths of winter, bringing the most valuable livestock inside isn't just a kindness, it's a practical necessity to protect her from the elements and potential thieves. Contributes to the meager warmth of this one-room world. The air is thick with the smells of old wood smoke, damp earth, unwashed bodies, and the faint, not unpleasant scent of hay and livestock. This is the scent of home. Your eyes are open now, but in the pitch black, it makes little difference. You don't need to see to know the layout of this cramped space. The central hearth with its cold, grey ashes. The wooden chest containing the family's few precious belongings, a spare tunic, a baptismal cloth, the knife your father left you, and, most importantly, the large soot-blackened cauldron that hangs from a hook over the hearth. Your stomach gives another low grumble, a reminder of its purpose. Time to get up. The sun waits for no one, and the Lord's fields won't plough themselves. You carefully swing your legs over the edge of the platform, your bare feet meeting the cold, hard-packed dirt floor. You shiver, pulling your rough woolen tunic tighter around your shoulders. Now, a modern mind might think time for breakfast. But the concept of a dedicated morning meal, the kind we consider the most important of the day, is a luxury you can't afford. Historians, in fact, still debate when the 3-meal-a-day structure truly became the norm for everyone. For you, and for most people who work the land, the day isn't divided by meal times, but by blocks of labor. You'll likely work for a few hours after sunrise before you get your first taste of food. The word breakfast itself implies breaking the fast of the night. But for you, that fast will continue for a while longer. A fascinating little tidbit is that for a long time, eating too early was even seen as a form of mild indulgence, something monks or laborers with exceptionally strenuous tasks might do, but not the standard. So you don't move towards the hearth to eat. Not yet. Your first task is to gently stoke the embers from last night, coaxing a small flame back to life with dry kindling and your own breath. A fire is life. It's a small beacon of light in the oppressive darkness. And most importantly, it's the tool that will eventually make your food edible. As a tiny flame licks at the wood, it casts flickering shadows on the mud and straw walls. You see the faces of your sleeping children, their expressions peaceful in a way yours rarely is. Your life is a constant, quiet calculation of calories. How much energy to expend versus how much you can consume. Every movement, every task is weighed against that internal ledger of exhaustion and sustenance. The hollow ache in your gut is a promise. It's the promise of a long day of back-breaking work in the fields. It's the promise that every muscle will ache by nightfall. And as you stare into the growing flame, your thoughts drift to the one thing that will eventually fill that ache, the one constant in your culinary universe. Your gaze shifts to the big black pot. It's already waiting. That cauldron is the heart of your home and arguably the center of your entire existence. It's a heavy, cast-iron beast, blackened with generations of soot, and it hangs on a sturdy chain that lower it over the flames. You grab a worn piece of cloth to protect your hand and lift the heavy, ill-fitting wooden lid. A puff of lukewarm, slightly sour-smelling steam escapes and clouds your face. You peer inside. There it is, the pottage. It's not a pretty sight. What you see is a thick, grayish-brown slurry, the consistency of thin, lumpy oatmeal. A slow bubble periodically works its way to the surface and pops with a lazy plop. This is your forever stew, the culinary constant in your life. This single dish is the answer to the question, what's for dinner? That was the answer to the question. It is the answer today, and it will almost certainly be the answer tomorrow. The core of the pottage is grain, but don't you dare picture fluffy rice or fine wheat. You're using the tough stuff, the peasant grains, barley, oats, maybe a bit of rye. These are hulled but not finely milled, so they're chewy and coarse. Yesterday you threw in a handful of dried peas from last autumn's harvest and the last of a wrinkled turnip. They have now been boiled into submission, their individual forms lost to the collective mush. Here's the part that a modern stomach might struggle with: this pot is never truly emptied. It's a perpetual stew. The leftovers from last night's meal from the base for this morning's additions. You just keep adding water and whatever new ingredients you have on hand. It's a marvel of efficiency, really. You save fuel by not having to start a new dish from scratch every day, and you never waste a single calorie. But it also means the pottage is a living culinary. The flavors of days past mingle and merge into a singular, monotonous taste. Sometimes when you're stirring it with the big wooden paddle, you might dislodge a chunk of cabbage from 3 days ago. It's both familiar and deeply, profoundly boring. You reach for the water bucket, which you hauled from the village well yesterday evening. It's a back-breaking task but essential. You pour a healthy slosh of water into the pot, thinning the thick concoction. The sound is a dull splash, quickly muffled by the dense stew. Then you turn to a small basket in the corner. Inside are a few lumpy, earth-caked carrots from your little garden patch and an onion. You take your knife, your all-purpose tool, and chop them roughly on a wooden board, not bothering to peel the carrot with any precision. The pieces tumble into the pot, fresh islands in a sea of ancient stew. A quick stir, and they too are submerged, destined to join the collective. This is where historical records get a little fuzzy, and food historians still argue about the finer details. While the basic formula was grains and vegetables, the exact composition of pottage varied wildly depending on the season, the region, and your family's relative wealth. Was it always a thick, grain-based porridge, or were there times, particularly after the pea harvest, when it was more of a legume soup? Some scholars argue that in the desperate weeks of late spring, the pottage might have contained more aged weeds and roots than actual cultivated crops. It was the ultimate use what you've got dish, a principle born of pure necessity. And what about flavor? Well, you can forget about a complex spice rack. The dominant flavor is earthy. It's the taste of boiled barley, of turnip, of onion. If you're lucky, you might have some herbs like parsley or thyme growing near the hut, and you'll throw a handful in. This adds a welcome hint of green, a ghost of freshness. But salt is a precious commodity. It's used for preserving, not for casual seasoning. A small amount might go in, but it's never enough to truly make the dish savory. The pottage isn't meant to be delicious, it's meant to be fuel. It's a dense, warm, calorie delivery system. With the new ingredients added, you swing the cauldron back over the low flame, where it will simmer and bubble gently for hours. The goal is to cook everything down until it's incredibly soft, easy to digest, and requires minimal chewing, a blessing for people with the worn-down teeth that are common in your world. The pottage is on. The day's main meal is technically cooking, but you won't be eating it now. You leave it to its own devices. Its familiar, slightly musty smell already beginning to fill the single room of your home. You pull on your worn leather shoes, grab your tools, and duck your head to exit the low doorway into the sharp, cold morning air. The fields are waiting, and your stomach is still empty. A few hours have passed. The sun is now fully above the horizon, casting a pale, watery light over the sprawling open fields of the manor. The initial chill of dawn has been replaced by the ache of physical labor. You've been walking behind Daisy the cow, your hands gripping the rough wooden handles of the plow, your shoulders straining to guide the iron-tipped chair through the heavy damp soil. It's a rhythmic, back-breaking dance. Lean, push, walk, turn the plow at the end of the strip, and start again. Your world is reduced to the smell of overturned earth, the feel of the vibrating wood in your palms, and the sight of the long, dark furrow you leave in your wake. Finally, the reeve the Lord's overseer signals a break. It's not long, just a brief respite from the endless toil. You lead Daisy to the edge of the field to graze on some weeds and let her drink from a trough. Your own stomach is now making its demands known more loudly. This is when you'll have your first meal of the day. You sit down on the damp ground, your back against a boundary stone, and reach for the small cloth bundle you brought with you. This is your lunch, your dinner, your everything while you're away from the hut. You unwrap it, and there it is, a hunk of bread. But this is not the bread of fairy tales. Forget the light, fluffy, golden-crusted loaves you might imagine. Your bread is dark, almost black. It's dense, heavy, and has the texture of a sturdy brick. This is maslin bread, or sometimes an even coarser version made from just barley or rye. Wheat, the grain that makes the fine, white bread for the Lord's table, is a cash crop. You grow it, you harvest it, you thresh it, but you don't get to eat it. That fine flour is for the manor house. But what you grow on your own small plot, the hardier, less prized grains. You lift the chunk of bread to your mouth. The crust is hard, a real workout for your jaw. As you chew, you can feel the coarse texture of the bran and chaff that wasn't sifted out. Fine sifting is a luxury, requiring special season time. Your flour is ground at the Lord's mill for a fee. Of course, and it's a rough and ready affair. A strange but common sensation is the grit. A little bit of sand and dirt from the millstones inevitably gets mixed in with the flour. This is a well-documented and unfortunate reality for medieval peasants. Modern archaeologists examining the teeth of skeletons from this period often find them worn down flat, not just from a tough diet, but from the constant, abrasive presence of grit in their daily bread. You're literally chewing on stone dust. The flavor is robust. It's sour with a deep, earthy taste from the rye. It's not unpleasant, just powerfully monotonous. There's no butter to spread on it. Butter is a valuable product that could be sold at market or rendered as part of your dues. There's no cheese to go with it today, as your small supply is being carefully rationed. It's just bread, dry, dense, gritty bread. Yet, you eat it with a quiet gratitude. This heavy loaf is your primary source of calories. It's what gives you the strength to push the plow for another 5 or 6 hours. It's portable, it doesn't spoil quickly, and it fills your stomach in a way the watery pottage can't. This single hunk of bread probably contains more than half of your total caloric intake for the entire day. Historians and bakers have tried to recreate this peasant bread, and it's a fascinating challenge. The starters would have been wild captured yeasts, giving it that distinctively sour tang, similar to modern sourdough, but likely much more potent and unpredictable. The ovens were often communal, a big clay or stone structure in the center of the village that everyone shared. Baking day was a major event. You'd bring your dough, marked with your family's specific symbol, and pay a fee in flour or a loaf to the person managing the oven. It was a social, communal activity born of the simple fact that no single peasant family could afford to build or fuel their own oven. The debate among academics often revolves around how often this baking happened. Was it a weekly ritual, providing relatively fresh bread? Or did families bake huge, dense loaves designed to last for a fortnight, becoming progressively harder and stale each day? The answer likely varies, but for many, a rock-hard loaf bread was a common reality. You break off a small piece and chew it slowly, methodically. You might dip it in the nearby trough to soften it, not minding that the cow just drank from it. Water is water. The bread doesn't dissolve easily. It just becomes a slightly less chewy paste in your mouth. You finish the last crumb, feeling the satisfying weight settle in your stomach. It's not joy, it's not pleasure. It's not joy. It's not pleasure. It's not pleasure. It's fuel. It's the feeling of having enough energy to face the rest of the afternoon. The reeve is already shouting, signaling the end of the break. You push yourself up, your muscles protesting, and walk back to Daisy. The taste of sour rye and damp earth lingers in your mouth as you grip the plough once more. The afternoon sun high and hot in the sky, beating down on your neck. The work is even harder now. The soil has dried slightly, making it more resistant to the plough. Your hands are raw, your back is a single, solid knot of pain, and your mind has entered a state of dull, repetitive focus. Push, step, breathe. The world shrinks to the rhythm of your labor. This is when the memory of your lunch, that solid, reassuring brick of bread, begins to fade. The energy it provided is being consumed with every step, with every strained muscle. The hollow feeling in your stomach is slowly returning. In a few hours you will go home to the pottage. But what about now? What does a peasant snack look like? You don't carry a bag of trail mix. There are no energy bars tucked into your tunic. Your field provisions are Spartan, designed for maximum calories with minimum fuss. Your lunchbox was that simple cloth you used to wrap your bread. Now, you might reach into a small leather pouch tied to your belt. Inside, if you're lucky, you might find a few precious items. Perhaps there's a hard, wizened apple, saved from last autumn's meager harvest from the single tree on your family's tenement plot. It's not a crisp, sweet, juicy apple of modern imagining. This is a small, sour, and slightly woody fruit, its skin thickened, its flesh mealy. But the burst of sharp, acidic juice is a welcome shock to your palate, a brief reprieve from the monotony of bland grain. You eat the whole thing. Core, seeds, and all. Or maybe today, instead of an apple, you have an onion. You might just eat it raw, like a piece of fruit. The sharp, pungent bite is another way to wake up your senses. It's a flavor explosion in a world of muted tastes. You peel back the dry outer layers and take a crunchy, tear-inducing bite. It's strong, almost medicinal, but it cuts through the dust in your throat and makes you feel, for a moment, more alert. Onions are a peasant's treasure. They are relatively easy to grow, they store well through the winter, and they provide a powerful flavor that can make the eternal pottage slightly more interesting. What about something more substantial? Cheese is a possibility, but a rare one. If your family has a cow or a few goats, your wife might make a simple, hard cheese. It's incredibly valuable. It's a way of preserving milk, turning it into a solid, portable, protein-rich food that can last for months. You wouldn't have a large piece. Maybe a small, hard nubbin, so salty and aged that you can only nibble at it. You'd savor it, letting the sharp flavor dissolve slowly on your tongue. This isn't for filling your stomach, it's for morale. One of the fascinating tidbits of peasant life is the use of what historians sometimes call ploughman's pickles or foraged greens. You might see a patch of sorrel growing on the edge of the field. You'd know from experience that its sharp, lemony leaves are edible. You could grab a handful and chew on them as you walk. It's a burst of vitamin C and a tangy flavor that costs you nothing but the effort of bending over to pick it. This intimate knowledge of wild, edible plants was a crucial survival skill, one that separated a hungry family from a starving one. The academic debate here often centers on the degree of planning versus opportunism. Did you consciously pack these snacks, or was your field lunch literally just whatever you could grab or find? For most, it was likely a combination. The bread was the constant, the planned core of the meal. The apple or onion was a ration supplement from home. The foraged greens were a bonus, a gift from the land itself. But what you don't have is just as telling. There is no meat, no salted pork, no jerky. There is no sweet pastry. There is no flask of wine. Your world of food is incredibly limited. It's about survival, not pleasure. Your lunchbox is a testament to that fact. It contains the bare minimum required to get you through the day. You chew the last of your sour apple, the crunch loud in the relative quiet of the field. The brief moment of rest is over. You wipe your hands on your tunic, the stickiness from the apple mixing with the dirt and sweat. The energy from the small fruit is negligible, A fleeting psychological boost more than a physical one. It's the memory of the heavy bread that's still powering your muscles. You get back to your feet, your body groaning in protest. The sun is starting its slow descent towards the west, but there are still hours of work ahead. The pottage is waiting at home, simmering over the fire. That thought, and that thought alone, is what keeps you moving forward, one heavy step at a time. As you continue your work, your eyes might drift to the dense, dark line of trees at the edge of the Lord's domain, the forest. To you, the forest is a place of immense and forbidden temptation. It is a vast, living larder, teeming with food that you are not allowed to touch. You can almost smell it from here. The rich, earthy scent of damp leaf mold, of pine needles, of wild mushrooms. You can hear it too, in the moments you pause your work. The distant call of a bird, the snap of a twig. And sometimes, if you're still and quiet, you can see it, a flicker of movement. A squirrel darting up a tree trunk. A flock of pigeons bursting from the canopy. And, the ultimate prize, a deer, stepping gracefully into a clearing, its ears twitching, its dark eyes watchful. For a man whose diet consists of little more than grain gruel and coarse bread, a deer is more than just an animal. It's a mountain of meat. It's fat, which your body craves with a primal, desperate intensity. Fat means flavor, it means survival through the harsh winter. The thought of a haunch of venison roasting over a fire, its juices sizzling and popping, is a fantasy so powerful it's almost painful. It's a dream of a full belly, of warmth, of a satisfaction you have never truly known. But it is just there to dream, and a dangerous one at that. Meat is the single greatest divider between your plate and the Lord's. For the nobility, meat is a staple, a sign of wealth and status. Their tables groan under the weight of roasted swans, peacocks, boars, and venison. For you, meat is an almost unimaginable luxury. Why, you might have a few chickens scratching around your hut, but they are far more valuable for their eggs than for their scrawny bodies. An egg is a regular, reliable source of protein. Killing the chicken gives you one meager meal and ends that precious supply. That choice is simple. You let the chicken live. What about a pig? A pig is the peasant's most common source of meat, the so-called walking savings account. Many families would raise a single pig throughout the year, feeding it on scraps and letting it forage. The autumn slaughter was a vital event, providing the family with salted pork, bacon, and not every family could afford to keep a pig. And even if you did, that meat was a finite, carefully rationed resource, not an everyday food. A few slivers of bacon might be dropped into the pottage pot to add a hint of smoky, salty flavor, a treat reserved for special occasions. You would never sit down to a large slice of ham for a regular meal. One of the interesting, and often debated, aspects of peasant livestock is the sheer cost-benefit analysis involved. Historians argue about how common pig ownership actually was among the poorest strata of society. A piglet was an investment, and it needed to be fed. If your own family was on the brink of starvation during the hunger gap of late spring, could you justify giving precious scraps to an animal? It was a constant, precarious balancing act. So you're left with the forest. The forest is full of free meat, but it comes at the highest possible cost. Rabbits, squirrels, birds, deer, they all belong to the Lord. This is a fundamental rule of your existence. The concept of wild animals being a common resource for everyone to hunt is completely alien. This is the Lord's land, and everything on it, from the trees to the deer, belongs to him. This is a point that is often misunderstood in modern romanticized versions of the past. The image of a plucky peasant living off the land is largely a fantasy. You lived on what you were allowed to grow on your designated strips of land, and you paid for that right with your labor and a share of your harvest. The wild was not yours to tame or take from. You watch the deer for a moment longer before it flicks its tail and disappears back into the shadows of the woods. The sight leaves an ache in your heart that is different from the ache in your stomach. It's an ache of profound injustice, a quiet, simmering resentment that you would never dare to speak aloud. The sheer tantalizing proximity of such abundance, coupled with the absolute prohibition on touching it, is a special kind of cruelty. You turn your back on the forest and face the field once more. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows across the plowed earth. You try to push the image of the deer from your mind, to forget the phantom taste of roasted meat. It's a dangerous thought. It distracts you from your work and fills your head with impossible desires. Your reality is the plow, the dark bread, and the eternal pottage. It's best to focus on that. The forest is another world, and it is not for you. The temptation of the forest lingers in your mind, a dangerous daydream. But then you remember the story of Thomas from the next village over. You didn't know him well, but his story traveled, as all such cautionary tales do, carried on the whispers of farmers and the stern warnings of priests. Thomas had a wife and several small children. The previous winter had been exceptionally harsh, and the spring that followed was a long, lean one. The hunger had become desperate. His children's faces were thin, their bellies swollen not from fullness but from malnutrition. So one night, driven by a father's primal need to provide, Thomas slipped into the Lord's woods. He didn't go for a deer, that would have been madness. He was skilled with a snare, and his target was small, a single rabbit. Just enough for a pot of stew that would taste of something other than boiled barley. He was successful. He caught a plump rabbit and, under the cloak of darkness, managed to get it home. For one night, his family had a real meal. The smell of stewing meat, a scent that hadn't graced their hut in over a year, must have seemed like a miracle. For a few precious hours, their bellies were full. But secrets are hard to keep in a small village. Perhaps a neighbor smelled the unfamiliar, rich aroma on the night air and grew suspicious. Perhaps one of his young children, in a moment of unguarded innocence, boasted of their delicious meal. The exact way the news got out is lost to gossip, but it reached the reeve, and the reeve, whose job it is to protect the Lord's interests, acted swiftly. The forest law was not a vague threat, it was a brutal, inefficient system of justice. The Lord's foresters, a rough and feared group of men, dragged Thomas from his hut. He was brought before the manorial court, which was presided over by the Lord's steward. There was no jury of your peers, no compassionate hearing. The evidence a rabbit skin found buried behind his hut was presented. The verdict was swift and inevitable. The punishments for poaching varied, but they were always severe, designed not just to punish the offender but to terrify everyone else into compliance. For a first offense of catching a small animal, a man might be heavily fined, a debt that could cripple his family for years. He might be put in the stocks, subjected to public humiliation. For more serious offenses, or for repeat offenders, the penalties escalated dramatically. A man could have his hand chopped off, a permanent, visible reminder of his crime. Blinding was another favored punishment. For killing a deer, the penalty was often death by hanging. Thomas, for his one rabbit, was made an example of. He was taken to the edge of the very forest he had entered, and he was flogged until he was half dead. Then his right hand, the hand that had set the snare, was struck off with an axe. The story serves its purpose. Every time you look at the forest, every time the hunger gnaws at you and the thought of a free meal enters your mind, you think of Thomas. You picture him trying to work his field with one hand, a burden on his already struggling family. You picture the fear in his children's eyes. And you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that it is not worth the risk. This system of forest law was a very real and oppressive part of medieval life, particularly in places like England after the Norman conquest. The king and his nobles set aside vast tracts of land as their personal hunting preserves. These weren't necessarily dense woods or forest in the legal sense, could include open heath, farmland, and even entire villages. The laws were designed to protect the beasts of the chase, primarily deer, and the punishments for breaking them were notoriously harsh. Historians still debate the extent to which these laws were uniformly enforced, with some arguing that local customs and the personality of the lord might allow for some minor, clandestine foraging. But the official law was draconian, creating a system where a starving man could be executed for killing a deer to feed his family. There's even a curious, small detail in some legal texts suggesting that owning certain types of dogs could be illegal for peasants living near a royal forest. A dog large enough to potentially chase a deer like a greyhound was forbidden. Some forest laws even required peasants' dogs to be lawed or maimed by having 3 claws of their forefoot cut off to prevent them from being able to run effectively. So you keep your eyes on the furrow you're plowing. The rabbit that just darted across the edge of the field, a flicker of brown and white, doesn't even register as food. It's a symbol of the Lord's power. It might as well be made of gold. The law is clear. The Lord provides the land, and in return you provide your labor, your crops, and your absolute obedience. The wild things of the forest are part of his world, not yours. Your world is one of domestic animals, uncultivated plants. You are a farmer, not a hunter. And the invisible wall between you and that forest is as real and as solid as the wall of the Lord's castle. The price of one hot, meaty meal could be a lifetime of misery, and that is a price you are not willing to pay. The sun finally kisses the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and purple. The reeve makes his final round, signaling the end of the day's labor. The relief that washes over you is so profound it's almost a physical sensation. Your work in the Lord's field is done. You unhitch Daisy from the heavy wooden plow. She stands patiently, her sides heaving gently, her warm breath misting in the cooling air. You run a hand down her flank, feeling for any sores or cuts from the harness. You check her hoofs for stones. She is more than just an animal to you, she is your single most valuable possession. She is your partner. Her name, Daisy, is not a whimsical fancy. Giving her a name is a reflection of her status. She is a member of the household, as essential as the roof over your head. In your mind, she is not beef. The thought of taking a knife to her throat and butchering her for meat is not just repellent. It's economically suicidal. It would be like a modern farmer setting fire to his only tractor. Daisy has 2 jobs, and both are critical to your family's survival. Her first job, the one you've just finished, is providing traction. She is your engine. Without her, you would be faced with the prospect of tilling your strip of land by hand with a hoe, an unbelievably arduous task that would yield far less. Or you'd have to rent a spot on a plow team from a wealthier neighbor, paying with precious grain or even more precious labor. Owning your own plow cow sets you a notch above the most destitute of your neighbors. Her second job begins when you get her home. After she has been watered and given a pile of hay, your wife will bring a small wooden stool and a bucket. She will sit by Daisy's side and milk her. The stream of warm, white milk hissing into the pail is the sound of life. It's a sound of life. But you don't get gallons of milk like a modern, selectively bred Frisian produces. Daisy is a hardy, all-purpose animal, not a specialized dairy machine. She gives just enough. A little of that milk might be drunk by your youngest child, a precious dose of fat and calcium, but most of it will be put to work. It will be left to sit until the cream rises, which will be skimmed off and churned, slowly and painstakingly, into a small pat of butter. The remaining skim milk, thin and bluish, will be heated and curdled to make a small simple cheese. Butter and cheese are milk, magically transformed into a state where it can be stored. They are your hedge against hunger. Here's a small, interesting detail while stronger. More powerful oxen were the preferred plough animals for the Lord's domain. For a peasant like you, a cow was often a more logical choice. An ox can only pull. A cow pulls and gives milk. For a family living on the absolute marginal purposes, this dual-use nature made the humble cow a cornerstone of the peasant economy. Historians, of course, love to debate the finer points of this. Was a single cow really strong enough to pull a heavy medieval plough through clay soil? Some argue that it was incredibly inefficient, and that peasants would have to pull their animals, creating teams of 2 or 4 cows or oxen to get the job done effectively. Others suggest that for the smallest plots of land, a single, determined farmer and his 1 cow could just about manage, albeit slowly and with immense effort. Your aching shoulders would certainly testify to the difficulty of the task. The thought of eating Daisy is a nightmare calculation. The short-term gain would be a spectacular amount of meat, enough to feast on for days and salt down for weeks. It would be a temporary reprieve from the gnawing hunger, a brief taste of the Lord's life, but the long-term consequence would be catastrophic. The following season, with no cow to pull the plough, your harvest would be smaller. With no milk, there would be no butter or cheese to see you through the winter. The loss of that small, steady trickle of sustenance would be felt every single day. Slaughtering Daisy wouldn't just be eating your savings, it would be destroying your ability to ever save again. So you gently laid her by her rope halter, away from the fields and back towards the collection of huts that is your village. She will share your village. Tonight she will share your shelter, her gentle chewing and soft snuffles a comforting presence in the dark. She is your tractor, your dairy, and your insurance policy, all rolled into one gentle, brown-eyed creature. She is to be protected and cared for, not consumed. The only way Daisy will ever end up in the pottage pot is if she drops dead of old age. And even then it would be a meal seasoned with sorrow. You finally reach your hut as the last of the daylight fades. Your shoulders scream, your feet are heavy with fatigue, and your throat is caked with the dust of the fields. Before you even think about food, before you collapse onto the bench by the hearth, you are overwhelmed by a single, desperate need thirst. You stumble towards the water bucket, the one your wife filled at the well earlier. You look into it. The water is murky, with tiny specks of dirt and straw floating on the surface. This water came from the village well, which is just a stone-lined hole in the ground. It's the same water source for everyone. The same source where animals drink, where people wash their hands and faces, and which is perilously close to the ditch that serves as the village that serves as the village that serves as the village latrine. You know from bitter experience that drinking this water straight is a roll of the dice. Sometimes it's fine, other times it brings on a week of fever and stomach cramps that leave you weak and hollowed out, unable to work. In a world with no medicine to speak of, a bad bout of dysentery can easily be a death sentence. So you hesitate. The thirst is a fire in your throat, but the fear of the bloody flux, as you cold hand on your heart. This is where one of the most crucial elements of your diet comes in. It's not food, but it's just as important for your survival. Your wife sees you looking at the water bucket and turns to a large clay jug in the corner of the room. She pours a cloudy, brownish liquid into a cup carved from horn and hands it to you. This is your salvation. It's called ale or small beer. Don't picture a frosty mug of modern craft brew. This is not a recreational beverage, it's a staple of hydration. Small beer is thin, watery, and has a very low alcohol content, probably less than 1% or 2%. Its primary purpose isn't to intoxicate, but to be safe. The magic of small beer is in its production. It's made by taking grains, usually barley, the same stuff that goes in your pottage, mashing them, and then boiling the mixture. A step your wife follows from tradition passed down through her mother and her mother's mother, is what kills the invisible demons in the water that make you sick. You don't know about germ theory, of course. You just know that people who drink the ale don't get sick as often as those who drink straight from the well. The subsequent fermentation process also helps to preserve the liquid and prevents new, harmful bacteria from growing. You lift the horn cup to your lips and take a long, deep swallow. The liquid is cool, not cold. It tastes faintly sweet from the malted grain, with a slightly sour, yeasty tang. It's often called liquid bread, and for good reason. It not only quenches your thirst, but it also contains a small but significant number of calories, helping to replenish the energy you've spent all day in the fields. It's the original energy drink. The production of this ale is part of the constant, humming rhythm of domestic work that falls to your wife. It's her domain. Historians call these women alewives or brewsters. In a world where water was a gamble, a woman who could brew a consistent, safe batch of ale was a vital asset to her family and community. A fascinating point of debate among historians is just how universally this was practiced. Was every single peasant household brewing its own small beer, or was it more common for a few women in the village to specialize, trading their ale for other goods and services? In some places, it was a small-scale commercial enterprise. An alewife might hang a broom or a branch overhead or an owl stake to signal that she had a fresh batch ready for sale. But for many, like your family, it was purely for domestic consumption. Another debate is about the why. Did they empirically understand the link between boiling and safety? Or was it pure ritual? The consensus leans towards the former through generations of observation. They knew that the process resulted in a safer product, even if they couldn't explain the science behind it. You drain the cup and hand it back to your wife for a refill. The small beer washes the dust from your throat and settles in your stomach with a comforting warmth. It's a taste of civilization in a way. It's the product of human ingenuity, a clever trick to make the dangerous world a little more survivable. In a diet defined by its brutal simplicity, onions, coarse bread, boiled gruel, small beer is one of your few processed foods, and it's one of the most important. Now, with your thirst quenched, you can finally sit. The smell of the pottage, which has been simmering over the hearth all day, fills the small hut. The hollow ache in your stomach, which has been your constant companion since midday, roars back to life. Finally, it's time for the main event. The one real, hot meal of the day. Your wife takes a long-handled ladle and scoops the thick, steaming pottage from the cauldron into rough-hewn wooden bowls. She hands one to you, and one to each of the children, who have been waiting with the quiet, hungry patience. You sit together on benches around the central hearth, the fire casting a warm, flickering glow on your faces. For this brief moment, there is a sense of peace. The labor of the day is done. The family is together. There is food in your bowl, and tonight the pottage is better. It's still the same familiar, grayish slurry of boiled grains on root vegetables. But you look closer, and you can see flecks of green from the herbs your wife added from her garden patch. More importantly, mixed in with the usual carrots and onions, are chunks of turnip and a handful of late-season peas. This is the taste of early autumn. This is the best time of year for you. The harvest is in. The grain has been threshed, and a portion of it, after the Lord has taken his sizable share, and the miller his fee, is stored in your small granary. The root vegetables in your garden are at their peak. The single apple tree on your plot has been stripped of its fruit. For a few short, precious weeks, you experience something approaching abundance. Your food stores are as full as they will ever be. Tonight, your wife might have even added a sliver of bacon from the pig you slaughtered last week, letting it render its fat and salt into the pot. The smoky, savory flavor permeates every spoonful, transforming the monotonous gruel into something genuinely satisfying. It's a taste you haven't experienced in months, and you savor it, eating sure not to miss a single drop. This is the time of year when your diet has the most variety. You might have cabbages, leeks and parsnips from your garden. You might have gathered nuts, walnuts or hazelnuts from the trees on the edge of your own land, not the Lord's forest. These could be ground up and added to the pottage to thicken it and add a rich, fatty flavor. Your children might have spent an afternoon gathering wild berries from hedgerows, and a handful of those might be eaten as a rare, sweet treat after the meal. This period of relative plenty is what you work for all year. It's the payoff for the back-breaking labor of plowing in the spring and the frantic, exhausting work of harvesting in the late summer. It's the time when the fear of starvation recedes to a distant murmur. You look at your children, their faces smeared with pottage, their bellies full for a change, and you feel a profound sense of relief. You have done it. You have provided for them for another year. A fascinating and somewhat debated aspect of the peasant diet is the feasting that would happen right after the harvest. Some historical accounts suggest that this was a time of almost reckless consumption. After months of semi-starvation, the sudden influx of food led to a brief period of gorging. It makes a certain biological sense your body, aftered by a year of calorie deficits, would be screaming for replenishment. But historians also argue about the wisdom of this. A more prudent farmer, knowing the long, lean months of winter and spring that lay ahead, would have stressed preservation and storage above all else. The reality was likely a compromise: a few days of celebratory, more generous meals, followed by a swift return to careful, meticulous rationing. This is also the time for preservation. Your wife will spend her days pickling cabbages in brine, drying peas and herbs, and salting down every last piece of the slaughtered pig. The kitchen garden, which was a riot of green just a few weeks ago. Every usable vegetable is brought inside, destined for the root cellar or the preserving pot. Every single calorie must be captured and made to last. Nothing can be wasted. The sight of your food stores filling up is a source of immense psychological comfort, a visual representation of your chances of surviving the coming winter. You scrape your wooden bowl clean with your thumb, petting the last of the savory, bacon-flavored pottage. Your stomach feels pleasantly full, a rare and cherished sensation. The warmth from the food and the fire spreads through your tired limbs. For a moment, looking at your family in the firelight, surrounded by the bounty of the harvest, it is possible to feel a sense of security, even a flicker of hope. But even in this moment of peak abundance, a shadow of anxiety lingers. You know how quickly these stores can dwindle. You know how long and cold the winter will be. This isn't a time for complacency. It's a time for gratitude, yes, but also for a deep, ingrained caution. The brief bounty of autumn is not a guarantee of survival. It is merely the ammunition you have gathered for the long siege ahead. The golden light of autumn fades quickly. The days grow noticeably shorter, the air sharper. The last of the harvest work is done, the fields are bare and muddy, and a new rhythm begins to settle over your life, the rhythm of winter. Your world shrinks. You spend far more time indoors, huddled in the smoky confines of your one-room hut. The driving rain and, eventually, the snow keep you from any meaningful work outside, save for essential tasks like tending to Daisy, mucking out her space, and fetching water. Life turns inward, and so does your diet. The variety of the harvest feast is now a distant memory. Your culinary landscape has become a stark minimalist painting. The main color is grey, the grey of the ever-present pottage. The fresh greens are long gone. The herbs in your wife's garden are withered stalks under a blanket of frost. Your diet now consists almost entirely of what can be stored. Every meal revolves around two things: dried grains and root vegetables. The pottage pot still bubbles over the hearth, but its ingredients are now relentlessly the same. It's barley and oat groats, maybe some dried peas or beans you managed to store. For vegetables, it's the hardy survivors from your root cellar, the small, dark space you dug into the floor of your hut. You'll pull out a wrinkled turnip, a woody parsnip, or a few soft carrots. They lack the crispness and sweetness of their autumn selves, but they are calories, they are sustenance. The taste of your food becomes profoundly monotonous. The subtle, fresh flavors of summer are replaced by the dull, earthy taste of storage. The onions, which you store braided and hanging from the rafters, are a saving grace, providing a consistent, sharp flavor that cuts through the blandness. The small chunk of salted pork you might have added to the pot in October is now used with extreme rarity. A tiny sliver might be shaved into the pottage once a week. A ghostly reminder of a richer time. Your daily bread, that dark, dense loaf, is more important than ever. It's the solid, reliable source of energy that keeps the chill from settling deep into your bones. But even the bread changes. As the winter wears on, your store of rye and barley dwindles. You begin to stretch it, mixing in other, less desirable things. Dried pea flour, or even ground up dry beans, might be added to the dough. This makes the bread even denser, with a strange, sometimes unpleasant aftertaste. But it makes the flour last longer. One of the interesting, and sometimes grim, realities of the medieval winter diet was the potential for contamination. Grain stored in damp, primitive conditions was susceptible to mold. One of the most dangerous was ergot, a fungus that can grow on rye. Eating ergot-contaminated bread could lead to a horrifying condition known as street Anthony's fire. It caused terrifying hallucinations, convulsions, and a burning sensation in the limbs, which could sometimes lead to gangrene. A sudden, inexplicable outbreak of madness and sickness in a village could sometimes be traced back to a bad batch of rye flour. It's a stark reminder that even your most basic food source could turn against you. The historical debate here often revolves around the severity of this winter monotony. Was it a constant, grinding struggle from the first frost to the last? Or were there peaks and troughs? The celebration of midwinter or Christmas was a significant event. This was the time for a real, if modest, feast. It was a psychological necessity as much as a religious observance. For this one day you might kill a cockerel. You might use a larger piece of salted pork. You might open a pot of the precious cheese you made in the summer. It was a bright spot of flavor and fat in a desert of blandness, a calculated expenditure of resources to boost morale and get through the darkest part of the year. But outside of these rare festival days, the routine is unbreakable. You wake up in the dark, you eat your gritty bread, you huddle by the fire, you eat your pottage, you sleep. Your body slows down. You move less, conserving every precious calorie. The world outside is cold and hostile. The world inside is smoky, cramped, and smells perpetually of boiled turnips. You look at the dwindling pile of firewood, the shrinking bags of grain, the last few strings of onions, and you do the math over and over again in your head. Will it be enough? Will it last until the snows melt? Will it get you through to the spring? The winter diet is not just about monotonous food, it's about the constant, no-grade anxiety of a dwindling clock. Every spoonful of pottage, every slice of bread is one less you have for tomorrow, still feels a lifetime away. In the bleak, monotonous landscape of your winter diet, there is one small patch of hope, one area that falls almost entirely under your family's control, the kitchen garden. It's not a grand manicured space. It's a small, scrappy plot of land right next to your hut, perhaps enclosed by a wobbly fence of woven branches to keep out the chickens and the neighbor's pig. In the depths of winter, it looks as desolate as everything else, a patch of frozen mud and withered stalks. But this small piece of ground is your secret weapon against utter culinary boredom and, at times, starvation. This garden, often called a garth or croft, was the domain of the peasant woman. While you, the man of the house, toiled in the Lord's vast, open fields growing cash crops like wheat and barley, your wife tended to this miniature farm. The food grown here belonged to you. It was not subject to the Lord's tithe or the reap's watchful eye. It was yours, and it made the difference between a bland, repetitive diet and one with a flicker of variety and nutrition. What did you grow here? Not grains. This was the place for vegetables and herbs. The absolute king of the kitchen garden was the cabbage. Cabbages were hardy, easy to grow, and produced a lot of food in a small space. Eaten fresh in the summer, they were a welcome green crunch. In the autumn, they were shredded, salted, and packed into earthenware pots to ferment, creating a sour, pungent preserved food, a sort of primitive sauerkraut that could last you through much of the winter. Alongside the cabbages would be the other stalwarts, onions, leeks, and garlic. These aliments were the flavor foundation of your entire cuisine. Without them, the pottage would be little more than tasteless, watery gruel. They were easy to grow and stored well, hanging in braided ropes from the rafters of your hut, away from my sun damp. Then there were the root vegetables. You would dedicate a significant portion of your garden to turnips, parsnips, and carrots. But don't picture the bright orange, sweet carrots of today. Your carrots were likely thin, forked, and could be purple, yellow, or white. They were tough and less sweet than their modern descendants. But they were a crucial source of sustenance, stored in the root cellar to be added to the winter pottage. Perhaps the most important part of the garden, though, was the herb patch. This was your medicine cabinet and your spice rack all in one. You'd have parsley, sage, and thyme. A sprig of thyme could transform a pot of bean soup. Sage, with its strong, slightly peppery flavor, was believed to have medicinal properties and was a prized addition to the diet. You might also grow mustard, letting it go to seed. The tiny, pungent seeds could be crushed with a little water or ale to make a fiery paste that could liven up even the dullest slice of bread. A fascinating undebated tidbit is the role of legumes in the kitchen garden. While field peas and broad beans were often grown on a larger scale in the open fields, the kitchen garden was the perfect place for cultivating different varieties. Lentils and climbing beans, trellis set up the side of the hut, could provide a vital source of protein that wasn't meat, dried and stored. They were the backbone of your winter pottage, giving it a thickness and nutritional heft that vegetables alone could not provide. Historians often emphasize that for the average peasant, the combination of grain from the field and legumes from the garden formed a complete protein, a crucial factor for survival in a largely meatless world. This garden was a space of female knowledge and inheritance. Your wife learned what to plant, when to plant it, and how to preserve it from her mother, who learned it from her mother before her. This was not formal written knowledge. It was a deep, practical wisdom passed down through generations of women who understood the rhythms of the seasons and the secrets of their small plot of earth. They knew which herbs could soothe a cough, which leaves could be used to make a healing poultice, and which plants would keep the longest in the cellar. So, even now, in the dead of winter, as you sit by the fire eating your bland pottage, The memory and the promise of the kitchen garden are a source of comfort. The turnips in your bowl came from that garden. The onion that gives the gruel its only real flavor came from that garden. And you know that beneath the frozen soil, the roots of the perennial herbs are still alive. You know that as soon as the first daws of spring arrive, your wife will be out there, preparing the soil, planting the first hardy seeds. That little patch of land is your family's private insurance policy, your bastion of flavor in a sea of monotony. It is a small but powerful symbol of your resilience and your ability to make a life on the margins. You take another bite of your dark, gritty bread. It's bland as always. You dip it into the thin pottage, hoping to soak up some flavor. The dominant taste is, as usual, boiled turnip and barley. But imagine, for a moment, that you could add a pinch of something that would make every bite burst with flavor, something that would make the vegetables taste more like themselves, something that would cut through the monotony and make your mouth water. You are imagining salt. In your world, salt is not the humble condiment in a shaker that we take for granted. It is a form of currency. It is a strategic resource. It is a symbol of wealth and power. And in your heart, it is one of the most precious things you own. You do have salt, of course. A small amount of it kept in a covered clay pot or a carved wooden box, tucked away somewhere safe and dry. You would never leave it out in the damp air. This small stash is guarded as carefully as if it were silver. Why is it so valuable? Firstly, because of its primary, almost magical, power preservation. The autumn pig slaughter would be almost pointless without salt. It is the salt, rubbed deep into the meat, that draws out the moisture and prevents the flesh from rotting. It's the salt that turns fresh, perishable pork into bacon and ham that can last for months, seeing you through the lean times. The same goes for fish if you were ever lucky enough to get any and even some vegetables, like the cabbages you ferment in brine. Salt is the barrier between your harvest bounty and inevitable decay. It is the chemical that allows you to capture time, to eat in February what you grew in September. Secondly, salt is a biological necessity. You don't know the science, but you know the feeling. On hot days sweating in the fields, your body craves it. Animals, like your cow Daisy, need it too. You'll give her a lick of salt from your hand as a treat, and she'll take it with a grateful rasp of her tongue. It keeps her healthy, and her health is your wealth. But the main reason for its value is its scarcity, or more accurately, the difficulty of its production. You don't live near the sea, so you can't simply boil seawater. Your salt has to travel. Somewhere far away, men are engaged in the grueling work of salt production. They might be boiling brine from inland salt springs in huge lead pans, a process that consumes enormous amounts of firewood, or they might be on a desolate coast, painstakingly collecting seawater in shallow pools and letting the sun evaporate the water, a process at the mercy of the weather. This salter-end work was arduous and unpleasant. Once harvested, the salt coarse, grey, and full of impurities had to be packed into barrels and transported. It moved slowly on rattling carts over muddy tracks or on barges downriver. Every middleman, every toll collector, every lord whose land it crossed added to its cost. By the time that sack of salt reaches your local market town, its price has multiplied many times over. The lord of the manor might even control the sale of salt in your village, making a tidy profit from your necessity. A fascinating, and often debated, point for historians is the quality of peasant salt. The pure white, free-flowing salt of today was an unimaginable luxury, reserved for the lord's table. Your salt was likely grey or brownish, coarse and damp. It would contain traces of sand, dirt, and other minerals, which would add a bitter, earthy tang. But even this bad salt was precious. The expressions "all to the earth," which today means a good, honest person, likely originates from this idea of salt being a fundamental, essential, and valuable part of life. So, in your daily life, salt is used with extreme frugality. You would never salt a taste. The amount of salt in the pottage is a carefully calculated decision made by your wife, just enough to prevent it from being utterly insipid, but no more. When you eat your bread, you don't sprinkle salt on it. That would be a shocking waste. The only time you might taste pure, strong salt is when you get a tiny sliver of the bacon that was cured in it. The lack of salt in your regular diet has a profound impact on your sense of taste. Your palate is accustomed to the unadorned flavors of the earth, the sweetness of a parsnip, the sharpness of an onion, the bitterness of certain herbs. These are the flavors that stand out. This makes the rare taste of something truly salty an almost overwhelming experience, a flavor explosion. You look at the small, protected salt pot in the corner. It represents the bacon hanging from the rafters, the pickled cabbage in the crock. It represents survival. And as you finish your meal, you're left with the familiar, unslattered taste of grain in your mouth. The dream of a pinch of salt is just that, a dream of a wealthier, more flavorful world that is not your own. The winter has been long. The initial relief of having full stores has slowly given way to a familiar, gnawing anxiety. The days are beginning to lengthen. A pale, watery sun hangs in the sky for a little longer each afternoon, and the first hints of green are starting to appear on the sunniest banks. This should be a time of hope. But for you, it is the most dangerous time of the year. This is the hunger gap. The French have a name for it: loss out of the seam, or the welding point, the difficult period of joining the old harvest to the new. It's the cruel paradox of early spring. Just as the world around you is waking up, your own resources are at their most depleted. You stand in your small storage area, the cold seeping up through the dirt floor. The sight is grim. The bags of barley and rye are frighteningly light. You can see the bottom of the barrel where you kept your dried peas. The last of the salted bacon was eaten weeks ago, at the feast of Easter. The onions hanging from the rafters are starting to sprout. Their green shoots a mocking sign of life when their bulbs are soft and shrinking. In the root cellar, you find only a few shriveled, woody turnips and a handful of leathery carrots. This is the result of months of careful calculation and rationing, and still, it wasn't enough. The winter was a week longer than you'd hoped. A bag of grain was ruined by mice. Your youngest child had a fever for a month, and you gave her more of the precious food to keep her strength up. Now you face the consequences. The harvest is still months away. The new crops you just started planting in the muddy fields are nothing more than tiny, vulnerable shoots. They offer no sustenance now. They are a promise for a future you have to survive to see. The hunger changes. In the autumn, you felt satisfaction. In the winter, you felt a dull, managed hunger. Now, it is a sharp, painful, ever-present reality. Your energy levels plummet. Every task feels monumental. When you wake in the morning, the emptiness in your stomach is a physical pain. You feel lightheaded when you stand up too quickly. You look at your wife and children, and you can see the same darkness in their faces, the same dark circles under their eyes. The laughter and chatter of the household have faded into a quiet, lethargic stillness. The pottage pot still hangs over the hearth, but it is a pathetic imitation of its former self. It is now a thin, watery gruel, mostly water with a few handfuls of the remaining grain and whatever sorry-looking vegetable you can find. It's barely enough to keep the worst of the hunger pangs at bay. Your daily bread ration, which was once a substantial hunk, is now a thin, precious slice. And it tastes strange, bulked out with ground bean husks or even, in the most desperate times, dried and powdered tree bark. This period of intense seasonal starvation was a fundamental reality of the peasant life cycle. It was not a sign of failure, but an expected recurring crisis. Historians and archaeologists see the evidence of this yearly trauma written on the very bones of medieval people. Studies of skeletal remains often show something called Harris lines, thin lines on the long bones, but indicate periods of arrested growth. A skeleton might show multiple Harris lines, a stark, silent record of the repeated childhood famines its owner endured, year after year during the hunger gap. The historical debate here isn't about whether the hunger gap existed, but about its severity and the strategies used to cope. Was it a period of universal, near-death starvation every single year, or did it vary dramatically based on the previous year's harvest, the wealth of the family, and the region? Some scholars argue that while genuine famine was a real and terrifying threat, in most years, the hunger gap was a period of intense, controlled suffering, managed through a deep, ancestral knowledge of survival. You feel a profound sense of powerlessness. You have worked as hard as any man can. You have been frugal, you have been careful. But you are at the mercy of forces far beyond your control: the weather, the quality of the soil, the demands of your lord, and the simple, brutal arithmetic of calories. The children are too weak to run and play. They sit quietly, their eyes large in their thin faces. Their hunger is a silent accusation that tears at your heart. You look out the door of your heart at the greening landscape. It's a world full of life, but there is nothing for you to eat. The Lord's deer are fattening themselves on the new shoots in the forest. The fish are spawning in the rivers, but all of that is forbidden. Your options have run out. The stores are empty. The harvest is a distant dream. There is nothing left to do but to turn to the last, most desperate food source of all the wild, untamed land at your feet. You must now become a forager to survive. The hunger is a constant companion now, a dull ache that sharpens into a painful cramp whenever you move too quickly. The food stores are no longer just low, they are gone. The last of the gritty bread was eaten yesterday. The pottage pot contains little more than boiling water with a few old turnip peels floating in it. This is rock bottom. So you do what generations of your ancestors did when faced with the same grim reality. You and your wife take a basket and your all-purpose knife and head out, not to the fields to cultivate, but to the margins, to the hedgerows, the riverbanks, and the edges of the woods to forage. This isn't a pleasant ramble in the countryside. This is a desperate, meticulous hunt for calories. Your eyes, sharpened by hunger, scan the ground with an intensity you normally reserve for your crops. You are looking for anything that is edible. Your wife, who learned this knowledge from her mother, takes the lead. She points to a patch of familiar, serrated leaves growing in the shade of a hedge. Nettles, she says. You know that touching them with bare hands will result in a painful, stinging rash. But she knows the secret. Using a cloth to protect her hands, she carefully plucks the tender young shoots at the top of the plant. When boiled, the sting disappears completely, and the nettles cook down into a green, iron-rich mush. It's not delicious, but it's food. It will form the new base of your pottage. You move on, your eyes scanning the ground. You spot the bright yellow flowers of dandelions. To the Lord, they are a weed. To you, they are a salad. You dig down with your knife, carefully extracting the long, thick taproot. The leaves are bitter, but edible. The root, when roasted in the embers of your fire, is starchy and slightly sweet. It's another small treasure. You gather wild garlic, its pungent leaves a welcome promise of flavor. You find the broad leaves of sorrel with their sharp lemony tang. You recognize the delicate fronds of young ferns, the fiddleheads, which can be boiled and eaten. Every handful of greens that goes into your basket feels like a tiny victory against the encroaching starvation. This is not random gathering. It is a highly skilled activity based on a vast, unwritten encyclopedia of folk knowledge. You know which berries will kill you and which will just give you a stomachache. You know that the roots of a certain plant are safe to eat, but only after they have been boiled twice, with the water thrown away each time to remove their poison. This knowledge is the most valuable thing you possess right now. It is the invisible shield standing between your family and the grave. A fascinating and grim, little-known food of last resort was the elm loaf. In times of true famine, people would strip the inner bark from elm trees. This fibrous layer would be dried, pounded into a coarse flour, and mixed with whatever real flour was left to make a truly desperate kind of bread. It was barely digestible and offered minimal nutrition, but it filled an empty stomach and could stave off the final pangs of starvation. The very existence of such a recipe speaks volumes about the severity of the hunger gap. The historical debate here often focuses on the line between foraging and poaching. While hunting a deer was a major crime, what about gathering snails or trapping a few small birds? The laws were often ambiguous. Technically, everything belonged to the Lord, but the enforcement of rules against collecting weeds and roots was likely lax, an unspoken acknowledgement that a starving peasantry. It was a grey area, and you operate in it cautiously, always with one eye open for the reeve or the Lord's foresters. You stay away from the deep woods, the preserve of the Lord's game, and stick to the common verges and stream banks. You spend hours at this task, your back aching from stooping, your fingers raw from digging. By midday, Your basket is half full with a motley collection of leaves, roots, and stems. It looks like a pile of weeds, and to anyone but you, that's exactly what it is, but to you, it is a meal. You return to your hut, your meager bounty in hand. Your wife washes the greens and roots in the precious, murky water from the well. She throws the nettles and other leaves into the cauldron, where they will boil down into a green, vitamin-rich soup. You take the dandelion roots and bury them in the hot ashes at the edge of the hearth to roast. The smell that fills the hut is different. It's not the familiar earthy scent of barley and turnips. It's a wilder, greener, more bitter smell. It's the smell of desperation, but also the smell of survival. When the pottage is ready, you eat. It's thin and tastes of boiled leaves. It's bitter, but it is warm, and it fills the aching void in your stomach. You chew on a piece of roasted dandelion root. It's tough, fibrous texture, a poor substitute for bread, but a substitute nonetheless. You look at your family, their chins green from the nettle soup. No one is smiling, but everyone is eating. You have survived another day. You have bought yourselves a little more time, and you know that tomorrow you will be out there again, with your basket and your knife, hunting for weeds. Because until the harvest comes, the weeds are all you have. One afternoon, as you are returning from a foraging expedition, your basket holding a pathetic collection of roots and bitter greens, you are forced to stop. A procession is making its way from the manor house down the track that leads past your village. It's the lord, his lady, and a group of their noble guests, all on horseback, heading out for a day of hawking. You do what you are required to do. You press yourself against the side of the track, pulling your children back with you. You avert your eyes and bow your head as they pass. You are not to look them in the face. You are to make yourself as small and invisible as possible. But you can't help but steal a glance. And what you see, smell, and hear in that brief moment feels like a physical blow. They are a riot of color and sound in your grey and silent world. Their clothes are made of velvet and silk, dyed in vibrant jewel tones of crimson and deep blue, colors you have never seen up close. The leather of their saddles is soft and richly tooled. The horses are magnificent, powerful animals, bred for speed and beauty, not for the drudgery of the plough. The air around them is thick with the scent of perfume, of washed bodies, of wealth itself. But it is not their clothes or their horses that hold your attention. It's the remnants of their midday meal. A servant follows on a pony, a large wicker hamper strapped to its back. The lid is slightly ajar. From it wafts a smell so intoxicatingly delicious that it makes your stomach clench with a painful, desperate longing. It is the smell of roasted meat. Not the faint, smoky memory of bacon, but the rich, complex aroma of well-spiced, fatty poultry. You can also smell wine, a sweet and fruity scent completely alien to your world of sour ale, and something else, a warm, sweet, spicy smell. It's the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg, of pies and pastries made with fine white flour and honey, or even sugar, that mythical substance that comes from far-away land. You see one of the young nobles casually toss a half-eaten object onto the side of the road. It lands in the mud, not 10 feet from where you are standing. It's a small meat pie. The crust is golden brown, flaky, and made from the finest white wheat flour. A rich dark gravy and chunks of tender meat spill from the broken side. Your entire being screams at you to lunge for it. It is more food and richer food than you have seen in months. It is lying there, in the mud, discarded. A single bite of that pie would be a feast, but you stay frozen, your head bowed. To move would be to draw attention to yourself, to acknowledge that you have seen their waste, to reveal the depths of your own gnawing hunger. And that is not something you can afford to do. You are a part of the landscape to them, no more significant than a tree or a rock. You must not remind them that you are a hungry, living man. They pass by, their laughter and bright conversation fading down the track. You wait until they are out of sight before you dare to lift your head. You look at the pie lying there in the mud. It is already being investigated by flies. You think of your children's hungry faces, of the bitter nettle soup that awaits you at home. This glimpse into their world is a form of psychological torture. You know, in an abstract way, that the Lord and his family eat well. You see the wagon loads of fine flour, the barrels of wine, the livestock being driven to the manor house kitchens. But to see it, to smell it, to witness it being casually thrown away as refuse, is something else entirely. This stark contrast is a well-documented reality of the medieval world. While you are surviving on for-aged weeds, the feast tables in the castle are a spectacle of conspicuous consumption. The amount and variety of food served was a direct reflection of the host's power and status. They didn't just eat different food, they ate in a different universe. A typical feast for the nobility might include multiple courses, each with a dozen different dishes: venison, swan, peacock often arrayed rest in its own feathers, fish of all kinds, elaborate jellies and custards, and fantastical edible sculptures called subtleties. The academic debate here often centers on the peasant's awareness of this disparity. Was it just an accepted, unquestioned fact of life, part of God's great plan where everyone had their place, or was it a source of deep, simmering resentment that occasionally boiled over into revolt? The answer is likely both. For most of your life, you accept your lot. It is the only reality you have ever known. But in moments like this, seeing that pie in the mud, a flicker of profound, burning injustice ignites within you. You look at the pie one last time, then you turn away. You can't bring yourself to pick it up. It feels tainted, not by the mud, but by the casual cruelty of its disposal. You pull your children close and walk back towards your hut, your own basket of weeds feeling heavier and more pathetic than ever before. The phantom smell of roasted meat and sweet spices follows you, a ghost that mocks the bitter reality of your empty stomach. The image of that discarded meat pie haunts you. It's not just the meat that stuck in your mind, but the vessel that contained it, the crust. It was golden light, and almost glowing. It was made from white flour. In your world, bread is not just food, it's a powerful and immediate symbol of your station in life. And the single most important characteristic that defines bread is its color. The whiter the bread, the higher the status of the person eating it. The Lord's bread, the kind used for that pie crust and served on his own table, is called a manchet. It is the pinnacle of the baker's art. It is made from the finest, purest wheat flour, sieved multiple times through linen cloths until every last speck of bran and germ is removed. The resulting flour is as white and soft as snow. The bread it produces is light, airy, and has a mild, delicate flavor. It is a food for people who do not need to worry about maximizing every last calorie, for people whose teeth are not worn down and whose jaws do not have to work hard to chew. For the nobility, eating this white bread is a daily reinforcement of their own purity and superiority. It's a way of saying, I am not like the common folk who eat the dark, coarse bread of the earth. Your bread, the dark, heavy, sour loaf of rye and barley, is at the opposite end of the spectrum. It's called maslin bread, or sometimes even coarser names. Its darkness comes from the type of grain used and from the brown that is left in the flour. To the Lord, your bread is horse bread, food fit only for animals. The social gulf between a manchet and a loaf of maslin is as wide and uncrossable as the moat around the castle. This bread hierarchy was an incredibly rigid and well understood part of the social order. There were even gradations in between. A prosperous merchant or a high-ranking cleric might eat travel bread, made from whole wheat flour that was less finely sifted than the Lord's, but still superior to yours. It was a light brown, a visible symbol of their middle-rung status. You could literally tell a person's social standing by looking at the color of their bread. A fascinating and slightly quirky detail is how this preference for whiteness extended to other foods. White foods were generally considered more refined, purer, and healthier for the elite. Almond milk, a popular ingredient in noble kitchens, was used to make blancmange, a white, creamy pudding of chicken or fish, rice, and sugar. It was the ultimate status food, white, expensive, and completely removed from the dark, earthy foods of the peasantry. This obsession with whiteness was part of a larger medical and philosophical belief system derived from thinkers like Galen, which associated colors, foods, and the four humors of the body. Historians sometimes debate the nutritional reality behind this color coding. From a modern perspective, we know that your dark, whole-grain bread, full of fiber and nutrients from the bran and germ, was actually far healthier than the Lord's highly refined white bread. You were, ironically, getting a more nutritious loaf. But this is a modern understanding. In your world, the logic was entirely different. The refining process to make white flour was laborious and wasteful. You lose a significant portion of the grain's volume by sifting it so thoroughly. Therefore, only the rich could afford to be so inefficient. Whiteness was a direct invisible advertisement of wealth. You have probably never tasted white bread. You have seen it from a distance, just as you saw that pie. The thought of its texture is a complete mystery. You imagine it must be like biting into a cloud. Soft yielding, requiring no effort. It seems less like food and more like a symbol, a myth. You think of your own bread. You think of its solid, reassuring heft. You think of the way you have to sort it with your knife, the way you have to chew each mouthful for a long time. You think of the grit from the millstones that wears away at your teeth. Your bread is the bread of labor. It is designed to be a dense brick of fuel for a body that works from sunup to sundown. The Lord's bread is the bread of leisure. It is designed for a body that does not toil. The memory of that golden crust, lying in the mud, makes the slice of gritty, dark bread you'll eat for your own meager dinner seem even darker, even heavier. It's a reminder that the world is divided not just into the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless, but also into those who eat white bread and those who eat black, and you are firmly, and for your entire life, on the side of the black. The hunger gap is at its peak, and your small supply of grain, the very foundation of your survival, is almost gone. You gather the last of it, a pathetic-looking sack that feels far too light in your hands. It's time to take it to be ground into flour. This is a task filled with a specific kind of dread, because you cannot do it yourself. You have to go to the Lord's mill. The mill stands on the river that marks the edge of the village. It's a large, sturdy building, the mill will turning slowly in the current, a constant, groaning presence in the background of your life. The mill, and the man who runs it, are a central part of the manorial system of control. You are forbidden by law to grind your own grain. The small handheld stone querns that your distant ancestors might have used are illegal. Owning one could result in a heavy fine and the confiscation of the tool. The Lord has a monopoly on the milling of grain, and it is a very profitable one. For the privilege of using his mill, you must pay a fee known as a multure. This isn't paid in coin, which you barely have. You arrive at the mill and find the miller, a man named Godfrey. He is, unlike you and your neighbors, well-fed. His face is ruddy, and his belly strains against his tunic, which is perpetually dusted with a fine layer of white flour of stock, contrast to the dirt and mud that covers your own clothes. Millers in medieval society had a notoriously bad reputation. They were seen as greedy, dishonest and untrustworthy. Songs, poems, and stories from the period, like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, almost universally portray them as thieves. And you have no reason to believe otherwise. You hand over your sack of grain. The miller he FTS it, a knowing, calculating look in his eye. He knows exactly how desperate you are. He will take his emulture, his legal share, which might be as much as 1/16 or even 1/12 of the flour. But it's the unwritten miller's thumb that you fear. It was said that a miller could feel the quality of grain between his thumb and forefinger and that he developed a golden thumb from the profits of his trade. This also referred to the sneaky ways he could steal a little extra flour for himself. He might have a rigged scale. He might have a hidden pipe that diverts a tiny trickle of your flour into his own private bin. He might simply scoop out a little extra with his hand, claiming it's part of the emulture, and you are in no position to argue. He is the Lord's man, and his word against yours is no contest. You have to stand there and watch as your precious, life-sustaining grain is poured into the hopper, knowing that a portion of it will be lost to you, not just to the legal fee, but to his quiet, systematic theft. This practice was so common that it led to a whole host of proverbial sayings and beliefs. A particularly interesting tidbit is the folklore that developed around millers. They were often associated with mischief, and sometimes even with the devil, because they controlled a powerful, mysterious technology, the mill's complex gearing, and seemed to profit from the suffering of others. The constant noise and the remote, powerful location of the mill added to its mystique and the miller's sinister reputation. Historians debate how much of this reputation was stereotype versus reality. Was every miller a thief? Probably not. but the system itself created an inherent conflict of interest. The miller's income depended on taking a portion of the very food that peasants needed to survive. In a time of plenty, this might be a tolerable annoyance. But now, during the hunger gap, every handful of flour he takes feels like he is stealing the breath from your children's lungs. It is a state's ancient theft that you are powerless to prevent. You watch as the massive millstones, grinding and scraping, crush your grain. A stream of coarse, brownish flour, mixed with the usual grit, pours out of the chute. The miller bags it for you, after setting aside his own generous-looking portion. He hands the sack back to you. It feels alarmingly light. You want to protest, to demand he weigh it again, but you bite your tongue. You have seen what happens to men who argue with the miller. They find that the next time they come, their flour is accidentally coarser, or the miller is too busy to serve them for a day or two. You cannot afford to make an enemy of this man. You sling the sack over your shoulder and begin the long walk back to your hut. The weight of it is a deep disappointment. It's less than you had hoped, less than you feel you are owed. This flour has to last you until the first small harvest of early summer vegetables. It's not enough. The trip to the mill is a perfect illustration of your place in the world. You do all the work plowing, planting, harvesting, threshing, but at every single stage, a portion of your labor is taken from you. The Lord takes his share of the grain, the priest takes his tithe, and the miller, with his golden thumb, takes his toll. You are left with the dregs, the leftovers, and the constant, bitter taste of helplessness. You arrive back at the hut, the miller's light sack of flour a heavy weight on your spirit. Your wife takes it, her expression grim, and carefully stores it away. Tonight's meal will be the usual, a thin soup of 4 aged greens, perhaps thickened with a spoonful of the precious new flour. The taste will be bitter, green, and earthy. There is no joy in it, only the grim necessity of filling your belly. In this world of savory, sour, and bitter, one entire category of taste is almost completely absent from your life's sweetness. The modern world is saturated with sweetness. It's in our drinks, our sauces, our snacks. For you, a truly sweet taste is a rare, almost magical experience, a fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure in a hard life. The concept of sugar, the crystalline white powder we use so freely, is something from the realm of fantasy. You might have heard of it in stories or sermons. It's a spice like cinnamon or pepper that comes from the exotic, sun-drenched lands of the Crusades. It is fantastically, astronomically expensive, worth more than its weight in silver. It is a luxury reserved for kings and the highest echelons of the nobility, used sparingly in their most elaborate dishes and medicines. The idea of putting sugar in your pottage is as absurd as making your hut out of gold. So where do you find sweetness? You have to look for it in the natural world, and it is a seasonal, fleeting treasure. Your primary and most reliable source of sweetness is honey, but honey is not easy to get. You might know of a wild bee colony in a hollow tree at the edge of the woods. Raiding it is a dangerous, painful affair, requiring you to smoke out the bees and risk dozens of stings. A more common way to get it is through beekeeping. Your parish priest might keep several woven hives, called skeps, in the churchyard. Monasteries were major centers of honey production, as they needed vast quantities of beeswax to make candles for their chapels. Sometimes you might be able to trade for a small piece of honeycomb at the market, or perhaps the priest will give you a little as a gift for some extra work you've done. When you get it, it is a cause for celebration. You wouldn't stir it into a drink or bake a cake with it. You would eat it as is, chewing the waxy comb to release the thick, golden, intensely sweet liquid. You'd give a small piece to your children, who would suck on it for hours, their eyes closed in bliss. It is a flavor so potent, so different from your daily fare that it feels like a gift from heaven. Beyond honey, your other sources of sweetness are fruits. But again, these are not the large, uniformly sweet fruits of modern agriculture. In the late summer and early autumn, you might find wild berries in the hedgerows, blackberries, raspberries, wild strawberries. They are small and often tart, but they provide a burst of sweet and sour flavor that is a welcome treat. You eat them straight from the bush, staining your fingers and mouth with their juice. The apples from the single tree on your plot are another source. You eat some fresh, but they are more prized for making cider. Most of the apples are crushed, their juice fermented into a hard, alcoholic drink that can be stored for the winter. It's a rough, sour beverage, but it retains a hint of the apple's original sweetness. Some vegetables also offer a hint of sweetness. Carrots, especially the young ones, and parsnips, particularly after the first frost has concentrated their sugars, can be surprisingly sweet when roasted in the embers of the fire. This mild, earthy sweetness is the closest you get to a dessert on a regular basis. A fascinating little-known sweet treat was verjuice or verjus. This was a highly acidic, sour juice made from unripe grapes, crab apples, or other unripe fruit. While it was primarily used as a souring agent in cooking, similar to how we use vinegar or lemon juice, a little bit of honey could be added to it to create a sweet and sour syrup that could be drizzled over other foods as a rare treat. It was a way of creating a complex flavor profile from the limited ingredients available. The historical debate here often revolves around the peasant's sweet tooth. Did they crave sweetness in the same way we do, or was their palate so accustomed to savory and sour flavors, simply not attuned to it? Some historians argue that the intense, infrequent experience of eating something like honey made it all the more powerful and desirable. Others suggest that the concept of a sweet course or dessert was entirely alien, and that sweetness was just another flavor to be incorporated where possible, not a separate category of food. Tonight, there is no sweetness. There is only the bitter taste of nettles and the dull, starchy flavor of the flour. As you eat, you might let your mind drift to the memory of the last time you tasted honey. You can almost feel the thick, sticky liquid on your tongue, a golden memory in the grey reality of your meal. In a world defined by hardship, the memory of sweetness is a small, private treasure, something to hold on to in the dark. It's a reminder that pleasure, however fleeting, does exist in the world. The weeks scroll by, each day a struggle against the gnawing hunger. But then, a change. A date on the church calendar approaches a saint's day, or perhaps Whitsun, the Feast of Pentecost. These religious festivals are the punctuation marks in the long, monotonous sentence of the year, and they are your only real holidays. More importantly, they are a time for a feast. Now the word feast for you means something entirely different from what it means for the Lord in his castle. His feasts are spectacles of excess. Your feast is a brief, modest reprieve from starvation. It is a calculated, communal decision to dip into your most precious reserves, a psychological necessity to remind yourselves that there is more to life than just survival. Preparation for the festival begins a day or two before. There is a sense of subdued excitement in the village. It's a break from the drudgery. You are excused from your labor in the Lord's fields. The women, instead of just making the usual pottage, engage in more ambitious cooking. The centerpiece of your family's feast might be a chicken. Not a plump, roasted bird like the ones in the Lord's kitchen, but an old cockerel, one that has stopped being useful. He is tough and stringy, not good for much, but on this day, he is a king. He will be killed and plucked, and every single part of him will be used. The meat will be chopped up and stewed for hours in the pottage pot, along with every vegetable you can find, to make it tender. The neck, everything goes into the pot to add flavor and gelatin. This stew, rich with the flavor of long-simmered chicken, will be the highlight of your meal. There will be better bread. Your wife might use a larger portion of the precious flour, and perhaps mix in a handful of ground peas or beans to make a special mousse. It will still be dark and coarse, but there will be more of it. It's a feast of quantity as much as quality. This is also when you might bring out the last of the hard cheese you made back in the autumn. You'll cut it into small chunks and share it among the family. The sharp, salty flavor is a powerful contrast to the blandness of your recent diet. You might also have a bit more of the strong, sour cider, a celebratory drink to mark the occasion. A fascinating element of peasant feasts was the communal aspect. Often, the whole village would contribute to a central celebration. There might be an ale meadow where everyone would gather to drink specially brewed, stronger ale, not the watery small beer of daily life, paid for by the parish or a local guild. People would bring their own food to share, creating a potluck of humble delicacies. Someone might bring a small pot of honey, another might have caught a few small river fish, perhaps with a sly, semi-legal net. It was a time of sharing, of reinforcing the bonds of community that were essential for survival. Historians often debate the true nature of these festivals. Were they genuinely joyful occasions, or were they more of a forced, ritualized merriment, a brief distraction from a life of hardship? The evidence suggests they were a complex mix. There was genuine joy in the rest from labor, the extra food, and the social gathering, but the shadow of poverty was never far away. The feast was a temporary state of exception. Everyone knew that the next day, it was back to the nettle soup and the grinding reality of the hunger gap. On the day of the feast, you gather with your family. The pottage, thick with chicken and vegetables, is ladled into your bowls. It is the best thing you have tasted in months. You eat slowly, savoring every spoonful. The meat is chewy, but it tastes of heaven. You use your special bread to mop up every last drop of the rich broth. For a few hours, you feel truly full. The warmth of the food and the slightly stronger ale spreads through your body. The children, energized by the rare protein and calories, might even have the strength to play a little. There is talk, and maybe even some laughter. You look around at your neighbors, also enjoying their own modest feasts, and you feel a sense of solidarity. We have made it this far. But the feast is, by its nature, fleeting. The pot is soon empty, the special bread is gone, the cheese has been eaten. As evening falls, the familiar quiet returns. The brief illusion of plenty evaporates, leaving behind the stark reality of your situation. The festival was a wonderful, necessary island in time, but tomorrow morning, you will wake up, and the ocean of hunger will still be all around you. Your hut is not far from the river that flows through the manor's lands. On quiet evenings, you can hear the gentle murmur of the water. On hot, still afternoons, you can see the silver glint of fish as they break the surface. The river, like the forest, is another of the Lord's larderesses, a constant, shimmering temptation. You know there are fish in that river. Fat, silvery trout in the fast-flowing sections. Slow, heavy carp and tench in the deeper pools. Eels, a particular delicacy, slithering in the muddy bottom. A single good-sized fish could feed your family for a day. It's pure, clean protein, a welcome change from the endless cycle of grains and greens. And it's right there. But, like the deer in the forest, the fish in the river do not belong to you. They belong to the Lord. The fishing rights for the river are his exclusive property, a valuable asset that he protects just as fiercely as his hunting rights. To be caught casting a line or setting a trap in the river would be considered poaching, and the punishments would be severe. Fines, flogging, or time in the stocks would be the certain result. This is a source of deep, quiet frustration. You can see the food, but you are forbidden to take it. The Lord might lease out the fishing rights to a professional fisherman, who would then sell his catch at the market in the nearby town at prices you could never afford. Or he might keep the rights for his own table, sending his servants down to the river with fine meshed nets to provide fish for his Friday meals. The church played a significant role in this. Religious doctrine forbade the eating of meat on Fridays and during the long season of Lent. For the wealthy, this was no great hardship. They simply switched from venison and beef to a vast array of fish and seafood. Their cooks prepared elaborate dishes of salmon, pike, and sturgeon. But for you, this religious rule presented a problem. You had no meat to give up in the first place, and the substitute, fish, was equally out of reach. A fast day meant, well, it meant eating even less than usual. Your already meatless pottage would be the same, perhaps with even fewer ingredients to mark the solemnity of the day. This absolute control over the waterways is a point that historians find fascinating. It wasn't just about the fish themselves. It was about controlling every resource of the manor. The Lord owned the water, the banks, and everything in between. He owned the swans that swam on the river and the herons that stalked its edges. He even owned the very reeds that grew along the banks, which could be harvested and used for thatching roofs or weaving baskets. Every aspect of the natural landscape was monetized and controlled. But humans are resourceful, especially when they are hungry. And this is where a subtle, high-stakes game of clandestine foraging would take place. You would never dare to use a net or a fishing spear in broad daylight. But perhaps under the cover of a moonless night, you might try your luck. This is where a little-known, entirely illegal, peasant fishing technique might come into play: the eel buck or wicker fish trap. This was a long, cone-shaped basket woven from willow or reeds. You would place it in a narrow part of the stream, facing downstream, perhaps baited with a few worms or some offal if you had any. The eels, slithering along the bottom, would swim into the wide mouth of the trap. The cone's narrowing shape would prevent them from turning around and swimming back out. You would leave the trap overnight and, before the sun rose, slip back to the river to check it, your heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Most nights, you would find it empty. But one night, you might pull it from the water and feel a welcome weight inside. A fat, writhing eel. It would be a moment of pure, illicit triumph. You would hurry home in the pre-dawn gloom, hiding the prize under your tunic. The eel would be skinned and cooked in the pottage pot, its rich, oily flesh melting into the stew, creating a meal of unparalleled luxury. The bones would be carefully burned in the fire, so there would be no evidence of your crime. The taste of that forbidden feast would be all the sweeter for the risk you took to get it. The academic debate on this topic is lively. Some scholars argue that such petty poaching was rampant, a constant, low-level form of resistance and a vital part of the peasant survival strategy. They suggest that manorial lords often turned a blind eye to it, as long as it was discreet and didn't challenge their authority openly. Other historians argue that the system of surveillance, with reeves, foresters, and watchful neighbors, was too effective, and that such poaching was a rare, desperate act with a high chance of being caught. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in between. As you stand by your hut, looking towards the river, you weigh the odds. The gnawing hunger in your belly argues for taking the risk. The memory of Thomas, the man who lost his hand for poaching a rabbit, screams for caution. For now, caution wins. The fish remain a shimmering, unattainable dream. The river flows on, a beautiful, tantalizing barrier between you and a full stomach. The hunger gap grinds on. Your diet of 4 aged greens, a few roots, and a meager amount of gritty flour is taking its toll, not just on your energy levels, but on the very fabric of your body. You are in a constant state of malnutrition, and your body is starting to send out clear, painful signals that it is failing. One morning, you wake up and your gums feel strange. They are swollen tender, and when you probe one with your tongue, you taste the metallic tang of blood. You look at your wife in the dim morning light, and you see that the skin around her eyes is bruised and puffy. Your eldest child has been complaining of a deep, aching pain in his legs for days. You don't know the names for these afflictions. You don't know about vitamin C or D. You only know the symptoms, and you know they are common in the late spring. You are suffering from the early stages of scurvy. Scurvy is a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, a nutrient essential for the body to produce collagen, the protein that acts as the glue for your cells, skin, and blood vessels. Without it, your body literally begins to fall apart from the inside. Your diet during the long winter months, dried grains, stored roots, a little salted meat, is almost completely devoid of this crucial vitamin. The fresh greens and fruits of summer and autumn are a distant memory. The nettle soup you've been eating helps a little, but it's not enough to reverse months of deficiency. If it gets worse, you could expect loose teeth, old wounds reopening, and eventually death. At the same time, your children are showing signs of another dietary disease, rickets. The lack of sunlight during the long dark winter, combined with a diet poor in vitamin D found in fatty fish, eggs, and fortified milk, all things you don't have, means their bodies can't properly absorb calcium. Their bones are growing soft and weak. The aching in your son's legs is a classic symptom. It leads to the permanently bowed legs and stunted growth that were all too common sights in the medieval village. Your diet is a direct cause of other health problems. The lack of fat and protein makes it difficult to fight off infections. A simple cut on your hand, instead of healing quickly, can fester for weeks, becoming a dangerous, weeping sore. The constant, low-level hunger weakens your immune system, making you susceptible to the agues and fevers that sweep through the village. A fascinating though grim detail is the connection between your diet and your vision. A deficiency in vitamin A, found in foods like liver, eggs, and colorful vegetables. The old, pale carrots from your root cellar have very little, can lead to night blindness. You might find it increasingly difficult to see in the dim light of your hut, or when walking home at dusk. It was a common enough affliction that it was simply accepted as a part of life. Historians and bioarchaeologists who study ancient human remains can see the story of your diet written on your skeleton. They can see the porous, brittle bones of osteoporosis caused by a lifetime of calcium deficiency. They can see the evidence of scurvy in the bone changes around the gums and joints. They can see the telltale signs of rickets in the curved bones of children. They can also analyze the chemical composition of the bones themselves to determine the primary components of a person's diet, confirming the heavy reliance on terrestrial plants, your grains and vegetables, and the near total absence of meat and fish. Your bones tell a silent story of a life lived on the edge of nutritional collapse. The academic debate here often centers on the survivor bias. The skeletons we find are of people who survived these deficiencies, at least for a while. How many more, particularly the very young and the very old, simply died from diseases brought on by their poor diet? It's impossible to know for sure, but the number was likely tragically high. The high infant and child mortality rates of the period are a testament to this harsh reality. You feel the dull ache in your bones, the tenderness in your mouth. You see the lethargy in your family. You don't understand the cause, but you know the feeling. It is the feeling of your body slowly, inexorably breaking down. You know that your only hope is the sun, the coming harvest, the return of the fresh, life-giving foods of summer. Your health is tied directly to the seasons, to the cycle of the earth. In the autumn you are strong. In the spring you are weak. It is the fundamental rhythm of your existence. You look out at the small green shoots in your kitchen garden, willing them to grow faster. They are not just potential food, they are your only medicine, your only hope of knitting your body back together again. The dull ache in your gums is a constant reminder of your body's slow decay. But there is another, sharper pain that plagues you, a pain that comes and goes with a vicious, throbbing intensity, the pain in your teeth. You have a tooth, a big molar in the back, that has been troubling you for months. It started as a dull sensitivity. Now, it's a hotbed of agony that can wake you from a shallow sleep. There's a hole in it, a cavity, and sometimes, when you eat, a piece of food gets lodged in it, sending a bolt of pure, white-hot pain through your jaw. You have no way to fix this. There are no dentists in your village. The very concept would be bizarre. Your options for dealing with the pain are grimly limited. You might chew on a certain type of leaf, a folk remedy said to numb the gums. You might press a hot cloth to your cheek. You might even ask the local wise woman for a charm or a poultice. But you know that none of these will solve the underlying problem. The state of your teeth is a direct reflection of your diet and your world. Firstly, there's the wear. That dark, heavy bread you eat is not just tough, it's abrasive. The grit from the millstones, the tiny particles of sand and stone that are mixed into your flour, acts like sandpaper. With every meal, you are literally grinding your teeth down. Archaeologists examining medieval skulls are often struck by how worn the teeth are, sometimes ground down almost to the gum line, even in relatively young adults. Secondly, while your diet is low in sugar, which helps prevent the kind of widespread cavities we see in modern society, it's not without its own problems. The starchy, carbohydrate-heavy nature of your grain-based diet creates a perfect environment for plaque to form. And without any concept of dental hygiene, no toothbrushes, no floss, that plaque builds up, causing gum disease and eventually decay. The pain you feel is likely from a cavity that has reached the sensitive pulp of the tooth, causing a painful infection and abscess. If the pain becomes unbearable, your only real option is extraction. And that is a terrifying prospect. The person to see would be the village blacksmith. He is the man with the strongest hands and the most fearsome-looking set of iron tongs. There is no anesthetic. You would sit on a stool, your head held steady by a friend, while the blacksmith, his hands grimy from the forge, forces a crude pair of pliers into your mouth. He would grip the offending tooth and then pull, twist, and wrench until it came out, hopefully in one piece. The sound of the root cracking, the searing pain, the gush of blood into your mouth, it's a brutal, terrifying procedure that people only resort to when the pain of the toothache becomes worse than the fear of the cure. And there's always the risk of the jaw breaking or the infection spreading. A fascinating, if wince-inducing, tidbit of medieval dentistry is the tooth worm. For centuries, it was widely believed that tooth decay was caused by a tiny worm that burrowed into the tooth and gnawed away at it. Cures often involve trying to smoke the worm out. A practitioner might heat a mixture of henbane seeds and wax on a piece of charcoal and have the patient inhale the fumes through a funnel directed at the painful tooth. The seeds, which are mildly narcotic, would produce a smoke that could sometimes stun the patient into feeling less pain. And the tiny, worm-like structures that fell from the seeds as they burned were presented as the expelled worms. It was pure quackery, but in a world without scientific explanation, it offered a sliver of hope. The academic debate here often revolves around the extent of dental health issues. Was everyone in a medieval village walking around with agonizing toothaches? Some studies of skeletal remains show a surprising number of people with relatively few cavities, likely due to the low-sugar diet. However, the evidence of extreme wear, abscesses, and tooth loss is undeniable. It suggests a world where dental problems were a common, painful, and often life-threatening part of existence. An untreated abscess could easily lead to a systemic infection and death. You probe the bad tooth with your tongue. It's loose. The constant, low-grade infection is eating away at the bone that holds it in place. You know with a sense of dread that its time is coming. Soon, the pain will become so great that you will have to face the blacksmith and his tongs. And you will be left with another gap in your mouth, making it even harder to chew the tough, gritty bread that is your daily lot. Your teeth, like the rest of your body, are a testament to your hard life. They are worn down, cracked, undaking. Each throb of pain is a reminder of the coarse food you eat, the world you live in, and the primitive, brutal solutions that passed for medicine. Your life is a bubble of monotony and scarcity, and it's easy to believe that your diet of pottage and black bread is the only way of life for everyone. But you are part of the 90%, the vast majority who work the land. There is another 10%, a diverse group whose plates look very different from yours. You don't interact with them often, but you are aware of their existence, and their food is a sign of their different world. Consider the parish priest. He is a commoner, like you, but his position affords him a better diet. He receives the tithe, a tenth of all the produce from the village. This means he has a greater and more varied supply of grains, vegetables, and fruit than any single peasant family. More importantly, he might receive tithes of eggs, cheese, or even livestock. His kitchen garden is likely better kept, and he might have the resources to keep more chickens or a pig. While he is supposed to live a simple, spiritual life, his meals are a clear step up from yours. He might eat bread that is a little lighter, a pale brown instead of your near black. His pottage might be thicker, with more variety, and perhaps a bit of chicken or bacon in it far more regularly. You see him as a man of God, but also as a man who, unlike you, never has to face the true desperation of the hunger gap. Then there are the monks in the nearby monastery. Their lives are supposed to be dedicated to prayer and simple living, but monasteries were often large, wealthy, and highly organized agricultural centers. They had vast, well-managed lands, large fish ponds teeming with carp, extensive orchards, and sophisticated breweries producing ale much stronger and finer than your homemade small beer. While the monastic rule often called for abstinence from the meat of four-legged animals, they became masters of creative interpretation. Fish was often defined very broadly. A seabird like a puffin, because it spends so much time in the water, might be classified as a fish. Even the beaver, due to its aquatic habits and scaly tail, was sometimes considered fair game for a Lenten meal. Monks were also famous for their gardens, growing a wide variety of herbs and vegetables, and for their beekeeping, ensuring a steady supply of honey. A monk's diet, while perhaps plain by noble standards, was often far more stable, varied, and nutritious than yours. The academic debate about monastic diets is quite lively. Were they truly living the simple life prescribed by their orders, or did their wealth and ingenuity lead them to a life of quiet, culinary comfort. The archaeological evidence from monastic latrines and kitchens often suggests the latter, revealing a diet rich in fish, fowl, and a wide range of plants. Then there are the people in the small but growing market town a half-day's walk from your village. Here, a different food economy exists. You might go there once or twice a year to sell a few eggs or a small pat of butter. The sights and smells are overwhelming. You see the town baker, pulling dozens of loaves from his large professional oven. He sells not just your kind of coarse bread, but also the middling, light brown bread for the town's merchants and artisans. He might even sell small white loaves, mimicking the bread of the nobility for the wealthiest townsfolk. There is a butcher's stall, a sight you would never see in your village. Here, carcasses of beef, mutton, and pork are hung up for sale. The butcher deals in fresh meat, a concept almost entirely alien to your soul-cured world. You see merchants, blacksmiths, weavers and cobblers, people who don't grow their own food but earn coin and use it to buy their meals. A blacksmith, with his valuable skill, might turn enough to buy a small piece of fresh meat for his family's Sunday dinner, a luxury you can only dream of. A particularly interesting urban food source was the cookshop. This was the medieval equivalent of a fast food joint. For a few pennies, a traveler or a townsman could buy a hot meat pie, a string of sausages, or a ladle of thick, meaty stew. The quality was oft unquestionable, with jokes and warnings about cooks using cat or old horse meat being common. But it represented a world of commerce and convenience that was utterly different from your life of subsistence farming. Seeing these other lives, even briefly, puts your own into sharp relief. You realize that poverty and hunger are not universal conditions. They are your specific lot. The priest, the monk, the town merchant, they all occupy a different rung on the food ladder. They are not feasting like the Lord, but they are not starving like you. They have a buffer, a small measure of security that you lack. You return from the town, the memory of the smells from the butcher's stall and the cookshop making your head swim. The small coin you earned from selling your eggs feels insignificant. It will buy you a little extra salt, perhaps, but it will not change your world. It only serves to remind you that you are at the very bottom of the food chain, living on the scraps and leftovers of a world that eats much, much better than you do. The sun climbs higher in the sky each day. The oppressive grip of the hunger gap finally begins to loosen. The broad beans in your kitchen garden have started to produce. Your wife can now pick a handful of tender young pods to throw into the pottage, their green freshness a taste of salvation. The world is turning. The cycle is beginning again. As you look back on the year that has passed, you see that your entire life is a circle, a wheel that turns with the seasons, and its axis is food. It is a relentless, repetitive loop of hope, toil, brief satisfaction, and long, anxious decline. The year begins in the spring, a time of paradox. It is the season of new life, of green shoots and bird song. But it is also the season of your greatest weakness. This is the time of the hunger gap, of nettle soup and for aged roots. Your body is at its most depleted, your energy at its lowest ebb. Yet, it is also the time of the most crucial labor. You must plow and plant, spending the last of your energy to sow the seeds that you pray will save you in a few months' time, betting your last reserves of strength on a future harvest. Then comes the summer. The sun is strong, the days are long, and the work is endless. The first small rewards appear: the beans, the early greens from your garden. The hunger begins to recede, replaced by a deep, bone-wearying fatigue. The main task is weeding, protecting your precious crops from being choked out. And then comes the haymaking, a frantic period of cutting, drying, and stacking the grass that will feed Daisy through the coming winter. The work is relentless from sunrise to sunset, powered by a slightly more substantial pottage in the promise of what is to come. The year reaches its peak in the late summer and early autumn. This is the harvest. This is the moment the entire year has been building towards. The fields of grain turn golden, and the whole village mobilizes. It is a time of communal, back-breaking labor. You work with a scythe or a sickle, cutting the stalks, your body screaming in protest. The work is frantic, a race against the weather. A single hailstorm, a week of rain, can ruin everything. But if the weather holds, the reward is immense. You see the sheaves of wheat and barley piling up, a golden mountain of calories. This is the payoff. The autumn is the brief, golden age of your year. The harvest is in. After the Lord and the church have taken their shares, your own small store is full. The pig is salted and hung. The root cellar is packed with vegetables. The pottage is thick and flavorful. The pottage is thick and flavorful. The fear of hunger recedes. For a few short weeks, you feel secure. You have a full belly. Your body recovers, regains its strength. It is a time of preservation, of preparing for the siege to come, but it is underpinned by a profound sense of relief. Then, inevitably, the wheel turns downwards into winter. The world shrinks. The days grow short and cold. The work moves indoors. Your diet narrows, becoming a monotonous rotation of stored grains and roots. The vibrant flavors of autumn fade into a dull, earthy memory. Winter is a long, slow battle of attrition. You watch your food stores dwindle, doing the grim arithmetic of huddling for warmth, of conserving every last calorie, of praying that what you have stored will be enough to see you through the darkness. And then, winter breaks, and you are back in the pale, hungry light of spring. The circle is complete. You are gaunt, weak, and at the end of your resources, and the whole cycle of plowing, planting, toiling, and harvesting must begin anew. A point of academic discussion is how aware the medieval peasant was of this cycle in an abstract sense. They didn't have nutrition charts or economic planners. Their understanding was visceral, intuitive, and passed down through generations. They felt the cycle in their aching muscles, in their shrinking bellies, in the taste of their food. It wasn't a theory, it was the fundamental, inescapable reality of their existence. This intimate, often brutal, connection to the agricultural year is perhaps the single biggest difference between your life and a modern one. You stand in your field, looking at the healthy green shoots of barley that you planted just a few months ago, back when you were weak and starving. They are thriving now. They are your future. They are the next turn of the great wheel. Your life is tethered to this cycle, and your only real goal, your only definition of success, is to live long enough to keep walking it, year after year after year. The sun on your back is warm now, a genuine warmth that promises life, not the pale, watery light of winter. The fields are a patchwork of vibrant green. The barley you sowed during the desperate, hungry days of spring is now knee-high, its leaves drinking in the sunlight. You have survived. The hunger gap has been bridged, and the lean times are giving way to a period of growing abundance. But the work is never done. The wheel never stops turning. Today you are on a small fallow plot of land next to your main strips, preparing the soil. This will be for a late-season crop, a few hardy turnips perhaps, another small insurance policy against the future. You swing your heavy hoe, the blade biting into the earth, turning over the dark, rich soil. Your movements are stronger now, powered by a diet that once again includes fresh food. Your thoughts, however, are on the act of planting itself. You think back to the spring, to the moment you took the seed bag. Inside was the most precious thing you owned, the potential for a future. Those seeds were not just random grains. Throughout the previous harvest, you and your wife had painstakingly set aside the very best heads of barley, the ones with the plum pest, healthiest-looking kernels. This was your future genetic stock, chosen with the wisdom of generations. To eat those seeds during the winter, no matter how hungry you were, would have been to eat your only hope. So you stood in the field, the precious seeds in a leather pouch at your side, and you began to sow. It is an act of almost religious faith. You take this concentrated life, this food that could save you today, and you cast it upon the ground, entrusting it to the soil, to the rain, to the sun, and to God. You pray that it won't be eaten by birds, that it won't be washed away by a flood, that it won't rot in a field that is too wet, or wither in one that is too dry. This connection between agriculture and faith is fundamental to your world. Before the plowing season began, the village priest would hold a special service on Plough Sunday. He would bless a plough, sometimes dragging it into the church itself, praying for God's favor on the coming agricultural year. This ritual wasn't just for show. It was a vital psychological comfort, a way of feeling that you were not entirely alone in your struggle against the unpredictable forces of nature. Your own private prayers whispered as you cast the seeds were the final, personal part of that ritual. Historians and sociologists often debate the mindset behind this annual act. Was it an expression of incredible human resilience and hope, a belief that this year could be better than the last, or was it a form of profound, almost fatalistic resignation? Some argue that you, the peasant farmer, were the ultimate optimist, constantly betting on a future you couldn't control. You had to believe that your hard work would pay off, that the cycle would turn in your favor. Others suggest that hope is the wrong word. They argue that you didn't plot because you were hopeful, but because the only alternative was to lie down and die. It was a mechanical act, a biological imperative to continue, driven not by a bright vision of the future, but by the grim determination to simply endure. The truth, for you, is likely an inseparable mix of both. As you cast the seeds, your prayer is not a vague request for a good harvest. It is a specific, desperate, and detailed plea. You pray for a harvest that is not just good, but so good that the Lord's share, the priest's tithe, and the miller's theft still leave you with enough. Enough to get through the winter without the constant, gnawing anxiety. Enough to ensure that next spring, the hunger gap will be a little shorter, a little less severe. You pray that you won't have to watch your children's faces grow thin and pale again. You pray for a harvest that gives you a buffer, a handful of days where you might feel secure. You cast the last of the seeds from your hand. They scatter across the dark earth, tiny specks of pale gold. They look so small, so vulnerable. Yet within each one lies the promise of bread, of pottage, of life itself. You have done your part. You have completed the ritual of toil and hope. Now all you can do is work, and wait, and pray that the great, indifferent wheel of the year will turn in your favor, just this once. The sounds of the medieval world, the scrape of the hoe, the lowing of a cow, the distant church bell, they are all beginning to fade now, softening and stretching, becoming part of a gentle, distant hum. The rough texture of the woolen tunic you wore, the hard ground beneath your feet, all of it dissolves, replaced by the familiar comfort and softness of your own bed, your own sheets. Your long day in the fields of the past is over. The journey is complete. The fields are quiet now, resting under a blanket of cool night air and a sky full of silent, shimmering stars. The pottage pot is cold. The fears of the hunger gap, the anxieties of the harvest, they all just echoes now, whispers from another time that can no longer touch you. The great wheel of the seasons continues to turn, but your part in its story is done. You can let it go. Feel the weight of that long year gently lift from your shoulders. There is no toil here in this quiet space. There is no hunger, only a peaceful sense of calm. The furrows in the dark earth seem to smooth out, becoming like slow, gentle waves on a deep and tranquil ocean, rocking you softly, slowly into sleep. The seeds of hope that were planted have found their rest. And so can you. The worries of the day, of any day, can be left behind. Let them drift away like smoke in the evening air. Let the darkness be a soft blanket, and let the quiet be a gentle friend. Your journey is over. Sleep now. Sleep deep. The end of the article. Good night.